Woody was so right. As I watched the events unfold in Boston this last week, as I called and emailed family and friends, as I prayed for people's safety, I was reminded that all of this is our land. Not that it belongs to us. If this last week reminds us of anything, it's that what happens in Boston or in Oklahoma City or in the Maldives Islands matters to all of us. As we move from grief to gratitude, from despair to determination, perhaps from anger to apathy, or from fear back into the frenzied pace of our lives, we remember that ultimately we all share the same destiny. Politics, religion, bombs, access to technology, storms, our safety, our livelihood, and our lives all depend on our relationships to each other and to the planet we share. It's been quite a week. Before the bombs exploded, I took my first ever carbon footprint quiz. It's online. If you decide to do it, you'll have to let me know how it goes. I've been reading up on climate change to prepare for today, on soil erosion, future wars over water, wilderness deprivation disorder in children, the economic threat to our national parks and preserves, the frightening and increasing number of environmentally caused diseases in lower income neighborhoods and nations, the threat of disappearing under the sea some of these countries, like the Maldives, already face. As my heart started to ache and I started to worry again about the future of my grandchildren and even of my children, I decided I needed a distraction. The Earth Day Network seemed to offer what I was looking for. Take your carbon footprint quiz here, it said in cheery, bright letters. So I clicked start. It asked me first to create an avatar of myself, so I created a woman with short hair, beige pants, a red shirt. There I was on my Tulsa city block looking quite environmentally competent. And I started clicking on answers to the following kinds of questions. How many times a week do you eat beef, pork, lamb, chicken? How often do you recycle? What do you recycle? What do you not recycle? Do you live in an apartment or a house? How often do you buy new appliances? How often do you buy new clothes? I was still feeling pretty good about myself at this point. I'm a good used clothes shopper. And the quiz continued. How many people live in your house? How often do you ride public transportation? They haven't been to Tulsa, those people. Do you own a car? How many miles to the gallon does it get? How many times a year do you fly in a plane? I was beginning to feel less optimistic. I've carried cloth bags around with me for almost 30 years. I don't buy Ziploc bags. I just use the plastic ones I come home with from the grocery store. We eat mostly whole foods. I've recycled and composted forever. I can say that because I just turned 50. I pick up trash when I walk in Tulsa's terrific park system. But now that I've proved that I try, I'll tell you my score. It would take 6 Earths to support my lifestyle if everyone on the planet consumed the way I do now. 6 planet Earths. 6 more planet Earths. There was the avatar of my best self on her city block with a big house on it, a plane flying overhead, a car in the driveway, power lines running across the hills to my house, my plastic recycle bins standing proudly on the sidewalk. But we don't have 6 more planet Earths. And I love this one earth we do have. Or should I say this one earth we've been given, the one we borrow for a time and can only be grateful for. This beautiful, bountiful, blue-green, bewildering, and generous planet on which every single one of us and every single person we love or have ever loved lives and breathes, works and plays, reproduces, dreams, and dies. What we love, we are compelled to protect. I'll come back to that in a minute, but it's true, isn't it? What we love, we are compelled to protect. I'm not going to try to teach you any science this morning. There are experts better qualified, including Eric. There are books and articles for you to read if you decide you want to. I did ask two scientist friends back in Maine, one who works in ocean science and the other who works in climate science, for recommendations, and I have a reading list for you in Emerson Hall if you'd like to take it home with you. The Green Team, waiting for you in Emerson Hall after this morning, also has copies of the work of our own member, George Crumey. If you didn't get a chance to hear him talk last month, you might want to pick up a copy. And you can have your own conversation with him. I'm expecting him this morning. One of the many important points he made is that climate change isn't really news, not new news anyway. In fact, back in the mid-19th century, an Irish physicist named John Tyndall figured out that carbon dioxide was a greenhouse gas and that the burning of fossil fuels would warm the planet. He also understood that every doubling of CO2 in our atmosphere would increase the Earth's temperature by a few degrees. So this morning, I want to pick up where George left off. Let's just say you believe, along with Mitt Romney, yes, Mitt Romney, that it's impossible not to take a look at our current energy policies without considering the question of climate change. Let's say you also agree with Mitt when he continues and says, I believe that climate change is occurring. The reduction in the size of global ice caps is hard to ignore. I also believe that human activity is a contributing factor. If you agree, then what is your responsibility as an individual? And what is our responsibility as a religious institution that has been and continues to be called the conscience of Tulsa? One definition of responsibility is a response according to one's ability and context. Ability and context include things like our access to information, our education, what kind of free or leisure time we have, our financial situation, what kinds of political connections we have, and more. You get the idea. Some of you may financially support some of the many environmental nonprofits in town. Others may have investments in alternative energy for-profit businesses. I know many of you do what my avatar does, try to buy local, compost, garden, recycle, carry cloth bags. Today I'm taking action according to my ability and context by speaking to you about what we might do together. Many years ago, though, I took responsibility in a very different way. And I want to tell you a little bit about that this morning. I'm sure many of you have read at some point or another, maybe in high school, Henry David Thoreau's Walden. It's one of our Unitarian sacred texts, you could say. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. You who read those words, though, probably didn't take them quite as literally as my husband, Rick. It wasn't too long after we started dating that I figured out he was serious about us trying to live out Thoreau's dream, which Thoreau described like this. I lived alone in the woods, a mile from any neighbor, in a house which I had built myself, and earned my living by the labor of my hands only. Soon, we were talking about how we would live off the land and find out what nature, small n, and capital N nature had to teach us. And yes, we had both read Ralph Waldo Emerson, too. We fell in love with a piece of land in the woods of Maine. We bought 40 acres at the end of one of those narrow dirt roads rarely found in America today, one narrow enough for the trees' summer canopies of green leaves to bend and reach across and touch each other's lofty tips. We were 1.5 miles from the paved road, and we lasted longer than Thoreau, too. He lived 2 years in his cabin, while we lived in ours for 9. No sewer, no power lines. When we bought the land, not an inch of it was clear. If you don't believe me, even after I tell you this story, there's some photos in Emerson Hall. We got to work without a generator or a power tool, not even a chainsaw. We did have bow saws, hand drills, and draw knives, however. We started to cut down the pine trees we needed with a saw. This also cleared a space for our house. Once the trees were down, we limbed them with an axe. Then we peeled off the bark with a 2-handled draw knife. It's true. We rolled the trees across the forest floors to our growing clearing with what's called, it took me a while to remember, a peavey. We piled up the logs one by one with come-alongs and winches, and the walls grew taller. Rick pounded hand-carved wooden pegs at the corners where he had bored holes with a hand brace to secure them in place. Within a year, we were living in a home we had built for $5,000. We put 4 solar panels on our roof and 2 large batteries in one of our sleeping lofts. The completed solar and water systems added another $5,000 to the cost of our self-sufficient setup. We built an outhouse, put in a wood-burning stove in the kitchen to cook and for heat, dug out an old house cellar and turned it into our first root cellar, planted fruit trees, put in a large garden, and quickly learned how to can. People look at me with a mixture of disbelief and respect when I tell them there was something awesome and inspiring about going outside to go to the bathroom when it was 30 degrees below zero. At that temperature, the trees snap, crackle, and pop. The stars shine so brightly, it's as if a heavenly queen has spilled her treasure chest of jewels and spread them across the sky. And the full moon reflects so brightly off the snow that night is almost as bright as day. When I tell this story to people, they also almost always ask me 2 questions. Why did you do it? And why did you leave? The answer to the first question is simple enough. First, we wanted to know what we could live without. We had decided that our common human destiny on this planet depended on people in developed countries, that's you and me, depended on us choosing to live with less. And we figured if we could do it, anyone could. Second, we wanted to live on the land with other people and find out how we would be changed if we were forced to depend on each other. Not just talk about interdependence, but really rely on each other in very clear and direct ways. We wanted to learn how to put the needs of the community above our own needs. That's why we lived our own version of Thoreau's social experiment. I'll get back to the why we left in a few minutes. First, I want to tell you about a conversation I had recently with George Crumey. Ever since his talk here, I wanted to understand why an oil man, of all people, was talking about global warming. So I asked him to start where he left off. He made a great case, climate change is no hoax and we're in trouble. And so I asked, so what? What do you want us to do, George? What are you doing, George? By the way, George said it was okay to tell you about our conversation this morning. I feel guilty sometimes, he said, but not too guilty. It's true I produce and sell oil. But it's not up to me how much we consume. That's up to all of us. It's up to us to stop consuming as much as we do. Without much prompting, he continued, I can't say I'm very optimistic, and so I do need the church to encourage me. And I think we need to keep raising awareness. We have the opportunity to be the conscience of Tulsa again, on this most important issue of our day. I waited. More than I feel guilt, he said, I worry. I worry about my children and my grandchildren. No matter what the outcome will be, we need to do our best. We need to do what we can. The most pessimistic predictors and descriptors of the devastations climate change will create, or is already creating, affirm that our actions can do and will make a difference. What or who will save us, you may sometimes wonder in the middle of the night. The fact is, we are the only ones, we the people, joining with other people. We are the ones who have the power to protect this one precious earth, made of mountains and monuments, farms and factories, rivers and rights of way, oceans and open spaces, deserts and driving ranges. Remember I said earlier we save what we love, not what we value, but what we love. One of our family stories is about the time my father ran, fully dressed, arms flailing, splashing wildly into the 9-foot-wide swirling foam along the ocean's edge to scoop me up and rescue me. The giant waves were creating a powerful undertow, and at age 3, I was about to be swept out to sea. That day, my father, who loved me beyond value, saved me. Thomas Berry, who we heard from before, writes, we know enough of our own history by now to be aware that people exploit what they have merely concluded to be of value, but they defend what they love. If you love this planet and all the life forms on it, which I know you do, then will you work with me to save it, to defend her? That's my question to you this morning. Tomorrow will be the 48th celebration of Earth Day. After witnessing the 1969 Santa Barbara oil spill, Senator Gaylord Nelson's heart broke open. In response, he got organized. Over 20 million people participated in that very first Earth Day. And now Earth Day is observed on April 27th each year by more than 1 billion people in more than 200 countries across the globe. There is a power and a majesty in nature, a stillness and a simplicity, a vastness and a diversity, a complexity and a continuity that is precious, precious beyond belief. What do you love? And what are you moved and motivated to protect? Is it the disappearing wilderness or the urban garden? Maybe it's your own backyard or our gardens. Will you fight to protect the rights of people to have access to clean drinking water? Will you fight for the rights of children in Tulsa to have healthy food to eat? I've listened as you've told me story after story about how nature saves you, how the view from a mountaintop restored your faith in life itself, how the sight of a flower took your breath away and filled you with hope again when you thought there was no more hope, how the sun shining on the leaves in a certain way made you burst into laughter in the middle of your despair, and suddenly you knew that you could survive the divorce and make it as a single mother. The world was given to us as more than a garden, much more. It was given to us as a refuge, as a teacher, as a wilderness, as pure power, as provider and sustainer. She has saved us time and time again. Now she needs us to save her in return. Which brings me back to why we left the woods. We left the woods not just because it was hard, but because living simply was satisfying, but doing it alone or as part of the small community that formed out in the woods of southwestern Maine wasn't enough. As connected as I felt to the elements and to our friends and to people around the world who live simply because they're forced to, I knew my life was beautiful, but also a little selfish. I felt cut off from civil society. But here in Tulsa, well, this is All Souls, and we have been and continue to be the conscience of Tulsa. Here, my passion can meet your passion. Your commitment can fuel and ignite someone else's. Together, we can make a difference in this city. And who knows how far our connecting circles can expand? Who knows how far our circles of influence will extend? In ways the influence of my family in the woods of Maine could not. And it's happening already. Here's a little good news. Our green team is growing. We're composting here at church. We're caring for a stretch of Highway 75. We're planting vegetables downtown in our community garden. I'm learning how to grow food. A little girl told me the other Saturday morning when I was working downtown. Some of you may have seen the clip on the news. Yes, you are. Isn't it amazing? I said to her as I joined with her in this delight at this fundamental miracle of life. The children of our congregation are hoping today that you will come back to church at 1 o'clock this afternoon and join them for lunch, to hear them sing, to learn with them, and to join them in some good, honest labor in our own gardens. Our green team leaders, I find this particularly exciting, are planning to meet with professors and students at ORU, who, I don't know if you'll be surprised or not, publish an EcoSense newsletter. And this is just the beginning. Because together, we must heed George's wise counsel and do what we can to protect our children, our grandchildren, and their children's children. This is my dream. I share it with many ministers across our country. I share it with Marlon and Tamra. It's also my ambition that however we feel about climate change, wherever we find ourselves on the continuum from despair to denial, that we align ourselves with the transforming and creative and mysterious power we have felt in nature and respond to protect it. That we move from grief to gratitude, from anger to awe, from overwhelm to engagement, from despair and debate to determination. That we be responsible, that we respond as we are able according to our ability and context, according to our knowledge and our nerve, according to our power and potential. This is my dream and my ambition, that together we will protect life, that together we will save what we love. May it be so.